Hello. This presentation discusses the importance of analyzing learners and the context of learning and performance. Okay, in this presentation we will cover three main topics, including learner analysis and the context of learning and performance. Just as a reminder, we are here in the Dick and Carey model and are considering our instruction by analyzing learners and the context of that instruction. The input for this step is the goal statement and the goal analysis. And what we do in this stage is consider the details of the learners and the context and how this will affect the design of our instruction. So let's consider how to analyze learners and contexts. There are several characteristics of the target population that we should consider when designing instruction. As we found in another presentation, we need to consider entry skills or prior knowledge of the topic being considered. We also must think about learner attitudes and motivation, general learning preferences, and any characteristics of the target population that could alter the instruction we are designing. You may recall from another presentation that as you develop your goal analysis, you will need to determine what prior knowledge the learners already have and what they already know how to do. That is, you'll need to consider the entry skills and prior knowledge a learner may already have. This is the most important part of a learner analysis. And while you are designing your instruction, it's always tempting to assume that the learner doesn't know what you're teaching or that the learner does know this part of the instruction. For instance, you might assume that a 10-year-old probably already knows their multiplication tables, but certainly that's an assumption. Wouldn't it be nice to know for sure what percent of your target population actually knows what you're about to teach? To answer that question, you could take the time to test a sample of the population. That would give you some data to generalize from. And you could also provide a pretest in your instruction to let students, say, test out of subcomponents of your instruction. So again, it's very important to find out what your students already know. This will only improve your instruction and prevent them from having to interact with extraneous materials. Now, prior knowledge is an odd thing. Many learners may have some understanding of the subject matter, but may only have a partial knowledge or even misconceptions of the subject matter. As you determine their level of prior knowledge, it's important to consider misconceptions because these ideas may be a barrier to learning. If you test your audience prior to providing them with that instruction, you'll be able to determine what their misconceptions are and be able to remedy them. Learners are busy people with a lot on their minds. If they're just not into it, that can change how they perceive your instruction. And even though you've developed the greatest instruction in the world, some people just may not be quite interested in it. Therefore, it's important to consider the implications of learner attitudes as you're designing instruction, not as you're presenting it. Dick and Carey's textbook discusses Keller's ARCS model. Let's consider these four elements of learner motivation. One of the easiest ways to avoid this kind of learner behavior is to gain and direct attention towards something that is relevant. Screen design techniques like this can gain and focus attention on relevant content. But relevance is also in the eye of the beholder. Your job is, yes, to get and maintain their attention, but also to make that instruction relevant. And while your instruction may seem relevant, sometimes students lack confidence. They may be concerned if they can actually accomplish the goals you have set for them. So in addition to setting those goals, it is also your job to ensure that they believe they can attain those goals. Finally, once a learner attains their goals, they will need to be acknowledged so they will be satisfied with the instruction that they have received. Learner attitudes are an important part of instructional design, and this was just the briefest of introductions to Keller's ARCS model, but we'll return to this topic in another presentation. For now, let's turn our attention to the goals of instruction and actually consider the learner both as they perform and learn. We need to know all about the setting in which learners will apply their new skills. Are they going to learn how to do something in the classroom, or will this be in a training environment? Environmental variables like these can change the nature of the instruction and the amount of training that can be covered. While working outdoors may seem appropriate as a learning environment, classrooms were designed that way for a reason. It's much easier to organize a group of individuals if they're focused on a single point and they're comfortable. Sometimes working indoors is a better learning environment. While working outdoors may provide context and allow practice with actual equipment, it has its own issues. In this case, it may be best to begin inside with a project briefing and then move outside to the training environment where the learner is fully aware of what they're supposed to do. Be especially careful with environmental variables. Is it too dark or too cold? Are learners able to do what is required of them, or is something holding them back? Variables like this can impede or even prevent the required performance. As you can see, there are many issues to be mindful of when designing instruction. As we discussed, the most important consideration is entry skills or prior knowledge. It's important to develop instruction that is not a complete review or too far over their heads. The needs of the learners must be met in a way which considers learner attitudes and considers variables like attention or relevance. You can find out if learners are satisfied with their instruction or feel it's not relevant by asking them directly, perhaps during a pretest, so that you can learn their intent and misconceptions. Also consider the context of the learner. The ability to learn and perform may be hindered by the environment. The environment can be so bad that it prevents your learners from being able to learn or perform in the first place. Finally, when you've considered all these variables and have conducted the goal analysis, the next step is to develop performance objectives. We'll get there in another presentation, but hopefully this has explained the importance of considering the learner and the context of learning and performance. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.